Before I get started, I'd be remiss if I didn't take a moment to say, wow. I think that we owe it to ourselves as a community here in Wichita to thank and recognize the Stand Together Foundation, the work that they're doing to transform communities across the country. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't take a moment to say, hey, thanks to Ty Spells and Christy Kendall for the incredible work and tireless effort that they've put in to helping all of us be up here to share our story today. The local team here, so yeah. And so that being said, I'm gonna get us kicked off with a quick survey. And so show of hands, who here has heard of the hotel at Old Town? That was my hope. Okay, put your hands down. So put yourself in the hotel at Old Town and imagine you're the manager of the hotel at Old Town, and you've agreed to let a young man come volunteer cleaning your carpets. And you know, he does a pretty good job, so you add him to the payroll. And unfortunately, a year later, the president of the hotel comes to you and he says, hey, it's been a rough year. I need you to cut your operational costs across the board by 20%, and you've got 3 days to do it. And now you're ticked. Your staff's upset. It's rough. I mean, let's be honest, it's rough. But you do it. And when the president of the hotel sees your list of cuts, he's shocked. Why didn't you cut the guy that you hired to vacuum? And your response? Because we can't afford not to pay to keep him because of the impact that he has on the culture and the morale of this hotel. Or what if I were to tell you that at the end of a long, hard day of work, on your way home, you can't wait to get home, but you would actively make the decision to wait in the longest grocery line because you know that that same young man from the hotel is bagging groceries in that line, and he's guaranteed to give you that extra little bit of joy, that extra little bit of sunshine to fill your cup and help you go home to be the best version of yourself. And what if I were to tell you that this same young man was born at 2 pounds, 7 ounces with a diagnosis of autism and severe intellectual disabilities? He was abandoned by his father at an early age, grew up in and out of homeless shelters, exposed to constant drug abuse in the home, enduring significant physical, mental, and emotional abuse. Now, wouldn't you agree with me in saying that this young man, he isn't simply disabled or hopeless? No, this young man is an overcomer. This young man is one of the most invaluable members of our community, and he's one of my best friends, and his name is Dallas. And Dallas has given me his blessing to share our story with you today. He's here with us. So Dallas, if you would stand and just wave to everybody. My name is Ben French, and I have the distinct privilege of serving alongside my amazing wife, Brittany, and an incredible team as the president and CEO of Shepherd's Way, a nonprofit organization right here in Wichita, Kansas, dedicated to launching adults with disabilities into independent, community-engaged, and purpose-driven lives. See, 8 years ago, about a year after I had met Dallas, he found himself yet again in another homeless shelter at St. Anthony's right here in downtown Wichita. And he was 1 week past his 8-week stay limit, and so the knee-jerk reaction was to get him into a government-funded program, a group home. He'd have a roof over his head, he'd be safe, he'd be supervised, he'd have staff that would come and punch in and punch out. He'd survive. He'd survive with nobody pushing, challenging, or teaching him, and certainly zero opportunity to develop his gifts and purpose in the world. But that was our only option. And so we pulled the emergency lever for crisis funding to try and get Dallas jumped to the top of an over 3,400 person waiting list here in the state of Kansas, advocating that without that crisis funding, our friend Dallas would be homeless. And yet even that was futile. And so we were forced to take a more private approach. And I thank God almost every single day that the system came back and denied Dallas's application for crisis funding on the grounds that homelessness, without an imminent health risk, is not considered a crisis. And so a year into our friendship, me and Dallas, we had the privilege of becoming roommates in a 2-bedroom apartment in downtown Wichita, where we would begin the journey of learning to live as independent, value-adding members of our community. And we were excited about this journey. And I can remember early on in this journey getting Dallas into the best psychologist I knew of at the time so I could better understand how do I best support and advocate for Dallas's future. And the sky was the limit for me. And so this psychologist, whose expertise and her opinion I greatly, greatly respected, she finished up her testing. And then I had a chance to sit down with her and share in some dialogue and my goals and my dreams for Dallas's future. And she came back to me and she said, Ben, Dallas's IQ is 52. He's in the bottom 1% intellectually relative to people his age. He'll never be able to learn and retain those skills that you're trying to teach him. And I can remember going back to our apartment that night, just feeling this immense, overwhelming sense of defeat. And then Dallas, asking as he always does when he can sense something's off, he said, "Hey, Ben, you doing okay?" I said, "Yeah, buddy, I'm doing all right." And that was just enough of a nudge of joy to give me the energy to do what I typically do when I begin to feel hopeless. And so I took the next step. I opened up my Bible, and me and Dallas, we began reading that night at our kitchen table in our apartment in the book of John 5 about how Jesus healed the man outside the pool in Bethesda who had been laying there for 38 years paralyzed. And I had heard this story dozens of times in my life, time and time again. It's a popular story. But what struck me different that night was the simplicity and the profoundness of what Jesus said. As he's healing this man, he says to him, "Pick up your mat and walk." And what struck me different that night was that Jesus wasn't sitting there dwelling on or focused on this man's circumstances, his disabilities, his diagnosis. No, he simply envisioned a brighter future for the man, and he spoke life into that future. And so it was that moment at the table with Dallas in our apartment that I made the commitment, never again will I ever look at Dallas or any other human being on the face of the earth for their disabilities or diagnosis. Never again will I ever let somebody, no matter how qualified they are, tempt me to look through that lens. And so Dallas and I continued to press forward on this journey of learning to live independently. And we worked hard every day on things like remembering to brush our teeth and take a shower every single day and do our laundry so that we could maintain our hygiene, enabling us to go out and get a job and hold it down so that we could have income, so that we could come back home and learn how to budget, enabling us to do things like pay our rent and have enough money to go to the grocery store so that we could come back home and learn how to cook and meet our basic needs. And it was the greatest joy of my life getting to watch Dallas not just learn, but retain those skills. And yet it was an even greater joy getting to see the sense of confidence and fulfillment that grew in Dallas from learning those skills. Impacting things like his ability to find purpose in his life, and form connections, and build relationships in our community. And so about a year and a half into seeing this transformation firsthand in Dallas, I realized, gosh, we have something really special and deeply impactful in this Pure Live-In mentorship model. And feeling the burden of the other 3,433 individuals on that same waiting list as Dallas in the state of Kansas, and learning of another 260,000 person waiting list nationwide, we began to look to the future, and we began to envision what it would look like to replicate this deeply impactful opportunity for others to follow in Dallas's footsteps. And we began to build what is today a Pure Live-In mentorship housing model that strategically fades back the support as individuals launch into independent, community-engaged, and purpose-driven lives with sustained supports. At Shepherd's Way, we're dedicated to continuous innovation and providing opportunities for young men and young women to overcome barriers and realize their value and purpose in the world. And with a heavy focus on things like independent living and career development and innovative transportation solutions. In addition to our recent efforts to scale outside of the state of Kansas, our hope is to transform the landscape of housing, independent living, and employment for adults with disabilities across the country. What if we could provide them with the alternative of careers, independence, purpose in our community? Can you imagine the value we could create for them, for their families, for us, for the entire community in the city of Wichita? You see, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here tonight to tell you that we don't have a staffing shortage. No, we have an imagination shortage. Imagine a world built on mutual benefit in the absence of neglecting others just to get ahead. Imagine a world and a community filled with people who see their fellow human beings through the lens of hope, opportunity, and potential, and not through the lens of their current circumstances, challenges, limitations, or shortcomings. Wichita, that world starts with us. And so today, in this very moment, as a community, let's commit and dedicate ourselves to that level of transformation. That the next time we see somebody with a disability, the next time we see somebody experiencing homelessness, the next time that we see somebody in a set of circumstances that the world or the naked eye would see through the lens of hopelessness. Let's reject the urge, the natural urge of judgment or pity, and instead let's embrace a perspective that sees the value, possibility, and potential for that individual's life. And let's adopt a willingness to empower that individual with the courage to overcome barriers and chase after a thriving future, because that perspective has the ability to build communities that see, love, and believe in people. That perspective has the ability to transform the city of Wichita and lives across the world for generations to come. And that level of transformation, that impact, that change, it starts with each and every single one of us. And that's our vision. Come join us.